Right away, when you come over the transmission grid, you're losing 12% of your energy. That's between line losses and congestion losses, right? The average in California is 12% of the energy that you interconnect in the middle of nowhere is going to be lost by the time you actually get it to a customer meter. So that's an inherent disadvantage that remote energy has. You're also dependent on a transmission line, which means that you have to build a transmission line or upgrade a transmission line if it's not sufficient to bring that energy to where you need it. And right now, the costs are going through the roof for electricity. I think everybody knows that. And what's driving it is transmission costs.
Your electric bill is going up fast, but the cost isn't coming down from where you think. And the fix isn't what utilities are selling you. I'm Tim Montague, and today we're going to unpack a $30 billion problem with Craig Lewis of the Clean Coalition. Here's the part most ratepayers never hear. When utilities announce a transmission upgrade, the sticker price is just the down payment.
So, but just take that number that you hear, $3 billion for some transmission investment. It's like, that's going to turn into $30 billion. That's actually going to hit ratepayers. And that is by far the fastest growing component of the electricity system. Energy rates are flat. They're not escalating. What's escalating is the cost of the transmission lines.
So if transmission is the problem, what's the alternative? Craig argues it's already sitting on rooftops and in parking lots. We just haven't built the policy to use it. Before we go further, there are two words the industry uses interchangeably that mean completely different things. Get this wrong, and nothing else makes sense.
So reliability is all about maintaining the current situation. So if the grid is up, reliability is about doing what you can to make sure that the grid stays up, right? It's maintaining the current situation or the desired situation. Resilience is what you do when conditions change, because conditions will change. The grid does go down. And so resilience is about what you do in reaction to change conditions to minimize the damage. And if you design distributed energy resources to provide resilience, they automatically can be used to provide reliability. Mm-hmm. The opposite is not true.
Read that again. Every battery in America designed only for grid services goes dark the moment your community needs it most. And here's the kicker. Nobody gets paid to fix that.
So there are no policies that provide for market mechanisms that compensate for provisioning resilience. This is the big problem, that everybody's designing for just providing reliability grid services as opposed to providing resilience as well.
California is the only state seriously trying to close this gap. It's called the Microgrid Incentive Program, and the numbers are big enough to get any developer's attention.
The biggest opportunity that I am aware of in the United States for community microgrids is in California through the Microgrid Incentive Program. So this is a program that's been stood up in California. It became an active program about 2 years ago. And it basically forces the three big investor-owned utilities in California to provide funding and to cooperate with entities that want to do community microgrids. And again, community microgrids are where you're dealing with multiple customers, multiple meters, and over a grid area, which is electrically connected together. That's a fundamental rule of microgrids, is that everything has to be electrically attached. And in the case of when you do a community microgrid, since you're dealing with multiple meters, you inherently are dealing with the distribution grid, a section of the distribution grid, because the distribution grid is what connects multiple meters together in a utility service territory. And the Microgrid Incentive Program, referred to as the MIP in acronym form, the MIP provides funding up to $18 million per project, and that's in the form of $14 million to pay for assets like solar and storage that are interconnected front of meter. So the MIP funds only pay for front of meter assets, and so up to $14 million for front of meter solar and storage, and then a $3 million allowance for grid upgrades. That's called the facilities allowance. And then $1 million to pay for interconnection costs, the studies and the any upgrades that are specific to interconnecting those front of meter assets to the grid.
If the grant covers 100% of CapEx, the value stack just for selling energy is gravy. But there's a catch. Only about 30 of these projects will get built, and the eligibility rules are brutal.
When you put your application in, you have to show that you are able to meet the 24-hour minimum, and you get extra points for going beyond that. So a lot of our microgrids actually get 4 days of full resilience, full solar-driven resilience. Mm-hmm. And so as long as we can hit our 4 days, and by the way, the 4 days is in year 10. So you have to show that this is all capable of hitting the 4 days in year 10, which means your battery degrades. Typical batteries degrade on about 3% a year. And so in 10 years, that's 30% degradation on the battery. And solar degrades at about 0.5% a year. And by the way, you also have to show that the load's going to grow 2% a year. So you got all these, these load escalation and battery and solar degradations that are working against you. But you have to do all of your resilience analysis at year 10. And what that basically means is that at day one, you have at least 50% of your capacity of your community microgrid is available for all sorts of grid services. Like whatever you want to do with that, all of that capacity is available, and you can still hit your minimum resilience requirement. Mm-hmm. Now, as time goes on, there are certain days where I have low solar, middle of a week of heavy rainstorms. You're not going to be generating a whole lot of solar, right? So you have to be very careful during that time with your battery capacity and making sure that you're never going below your minimum state of charge that's required for resilience. The Clean Coalition has a value resilience methodology, a VOR methodology, and we have a construct called the SOCR, which stands for state of charge, minimum state of charge required for resilience. So SOC is state of charge, lowercase subscript r is required for resilience. And so the SOCR, you have to always know where your SOCR is, and your battery can never get below that level, because that's the level you have designed to guarantee the level of resilience that you've guaranteed. So you always have to know where your SOCR is, and your battery state of charge can never go below that. And it changes every 15 minutes, right? It depends on what's your load at any, for the forecasted time, going ahead, what's the solar forecast going ahead, and kind of the difference between those two is going to determine what your SOCR is at any given 15-minute interval.
While California debates policy, one San Diego company is just shipping. Luminia has 100 megawatts of distributed battery under contract with 2 community choice aggregators, and they're doing it on both sides of the meter.
So I believe that they have over 100 megawatts of battery, just strictly battery agreements, and they can tack solar on with it as well. But just from the battery capacity, they've got 100 megawatts of distributed battery capacity contracts between those two CCAs, SDCP and CEA, and so they are actively deploying sites where smaller chunks of batteries, and smaller meaning they're probably going down to somewhere between 1 and 5 megawatts on the small side, and then they could go up to I think they could probably do 20, maybe 50 megawatts on the high side if they wanted to, but they're really focused on the smaller battery projects and getting those distributed around the service territory to provide the most value to the grid, getting those grid services, the grid services infrastructure, the ability to provide grid services distributed around San Diego County. So they have a tremendous amount of capacity under contract with the 2 CCAs. They can interconnect those on either side of the meter, behind the meter or in front of the meter. And they also have a solar microgrid program that is really interesting to bring behind the meter solar and storage to the CCA service territories in a manner that will provide direct benefits to like the value stack gets much richer when you go behind the meter, because now you can offset the transmission distribution costs. And that's the only way to escape transmission and distribution costs, is to go behind the meter, at least in an investor-owned utility service territory.
Why does behind the meter matter so much? Because of how California meters transmission costs. And Craig says it's done wrong.
In the 75% of the California that is served by the investor-owned utilities, it is done wrong. It is done at the customer meter. That is the wrong place to meter and assess for transmission costs. It is done correctly in a good chunk of the 25% of the California electricity market that is served by municipal utilities like LADWP and Sacramento Municipal Utility District. Those are number 3 and 4 in terms of the biggest utilities in California. And they are able to balance their own service territory and only trade with CAISO at the transmission and distribution interface. And so those municipal utilities can't, when they get clean local energy within the distribution grid, they avoid their transmission costs, which are somewhere in the order of 7 to 8 cents a kilowatt hour at wholesale in the San Diego market. So in SDG&E service territory, transmission access charges today are 7 to 8 cents a kilowatt hour, and that's wholesale rate. So when that gets translated onto an electricity bill for delivery charges, that translates into probably twice that, right? We're talking about somewhere in like the 15 cents range of what transmission costs are being heaped onto San Diego SDG&E customers, whether they get their energy from San Diego Gas and Electric or whether they get it from a CCA or direct access provider. There's no way to escape the transmission costs in California in an investor-owned utility service territory unless you go behind the meter.
Here's where it gets interesting for data centers, AI build-out, and anyone who can't wait 5 years for a grid upgrade. Craig calls it energy Tetris.
Out here, I live in Santa Barbara, and right next door in Goleta is where Google has their whole quantum AI headquarters. And they have very rapid load growth requirements, and they need to get energy a lot faster than the grid is going to be able to be upgraded. So we need to be able to use DER to increase the carrying capacity of the grid, the existing grid, without requiring any upgrades, by deploying distributed energy resources at the Google site, at the site next door, and at the site a mile away that's still on the same electrical feeder. Now we can allow for Google to increase its load at its site, because on that same feeder we've been able to reduce the effective grid impact of other loads by taking down the peak loads at those other locations. And we call this whole concept energy Tetris. And energy in the game of Tetris, right? You're trying to line up all these shapes, and then when you get a full row solved, the row disappears, right? And this is how you win. You keep bringing down, you keep putting these shapes together. So distributed energy resources allow us to have a lot more shapes and in a lot smaller pieces that allow us to win in this game of energy Tetris.
A 25% capacity increase on existing wires. No new transmission. No 10-year permitting cycle. Just smart orchestration of assets that in many cases are already installed. So what do you do with all this? If you're an EPC, the question isn't whether you add storage to your projects, it's whether you're designing them for resilience or just reliability, because that decision determines whether your customers' lights stay on. If you're a developer, California's MIP is a proof point. The next 5 states that copy it will define the next decade of community-scale solar. And if you're a commercial off-taker, you have more leverage than you think. The value stack is real. It just requires someone who knows how to assemble it.